I recently got my hands on a few demos and early access titles for this week's Strategy Fest on Steam, and the first key I was sent is for a smaller game designed around replayability and scaling challenges, and that is WizardChess, which is essentially a bite-sized, not quite roguelite strategy game where each run will take you 10 to 20 minutes, so the perfect length for during a lunch break. Now, as far as the story, there isn't really much of one, since this is a quick drop-in, play around, then go about your day sort of game. But you do get a pinch of snarky dialogue between your character, the bard, and whatever opponent they are challenging at the time. Be that the tutorial wizard, the Scottish ogre-like character, the snake, or even the queen herself. It never gets too deep, but it does have enough there that it is worth mentioning as being fairly entertaining. The main appeal of a game like this is going to be the gameplay loop, what is going to keep you coming back to play again and again, how diverse the runs are, and of course the actual gameplay and how the round-to-round gameplay functions. And before it's asked, the current version does not actually have any form of meta progression, despite the roguelite feel you'll get at first. You pretty much just unlock higher difficulty versions of a boss by beating them, as well as unlocking additional bosses once you hit the target tier. And it leads you along this path pretty nicely by recommending your next challenger at the end of each run, and you can either face them right then or just come back later and use the menu to get to them. Now, when you face a challenger, you are dropped into a randomized map with almost Tetris-style sections where you'll run into various types of interactions, with the most common being the basic combat interaction, but supplementary sections also appearing that vary depending on where you are at in the game. Treasure rooms give you, well, obviously treasure. You have shops where you can buy stuff, and both of those are fairly basic, but you will also find rooms where you can exchange one of your units for a buff or even another unit. You'll find other rooms that give you sort of deals with the devil where you can get a boon at the cost of a downside, and in later levels you'll even get some ruins where you can sacrifice one of your units in exchange for a random assortment of enemy units, which can be great or awful. Since this is still early access, I would not be surprised if there ends up being even more room for variety in the future, or even more variety inside the actual rooms themselves, which currently are nicely predictable in what choices you'll have, but I could see some potential for fun tricks and flavor that they could throw in there as work continues on the title. Would definitely love some of these rooms to be hybridized as well, like say a shop but with one item you can swap a character for, or mini ruins that let you gamble your units to multiple altars. That said, the diversity of runs overall is pretty solid, though admittedly some of the battle maps later on can get a bit tough to navigate due to terrain obstacles and enemy placement. This could be curbed a bit by allowing you a little more control of your initial positioning in battle, as well as the units you bring along. This is because currently this is only marginally in your control, since each map will bring in your least fatigued units and place them around you, which in most situations is fine and means you will end up using most if not all of your army since it picks them for you. But if you're unlucky and persistent at trying to break things like I am, you can easily end up with near soft locks, and they could also happen with bad luck, especially if you get stuck with a lot of units like lizards and archers, which can trap you in a bubble just waiting for death. When that happens, I usually just abandon the run, and since they're so short, it doesn't matter much, though it is something that the developer may want to look at as it approaches release, and an initial placement option or even a party select option would pretty much automatically fix all this. Though it would also decrease the difficulty somewhat noticeably when it comes to certain challenges. But in the flip side, it would still provide sufficient challenge to be enjoyable in the limited time frame of most runs. Now, when you avoid this one super rare flaw, the actual gameplay will show you why this is called chess instead of tactics, and that is the game functions on a 1 turn equals 1 unit moved system, just like chess, rather than a turn order system like most tactics games. And the units often have similar movement rules as various chess pieces, with there even being a literal knight unit that gets buffs by having more movement options available. Another interesting twist is that you need to deal enough damage to kill a unit in 1 turn to clear it off the map, which can make positioning in this toggling turn system actually somewhat interesting and require mixing ranged and melee units, as well as having a few units that can survive a turn's worth of hits as well as to lure them into place. It really does end up with a fun dynamic for a quick pick up and go game, and most of the units are simple enough that you'll have down their methodology in a battle or two after getting them, which is really nice. Though I can't help but think there's something I'm missing about the chicken units. Not sure if they're an Easter egg or a hidden treasure yet, but they are a bit odd. And obviously, it's fine that not all units are created equal, since it adds dynamics to the formula. Though it does make me sad when the rotation of units ends up giving me the weaker ones of the lot for a tough battle, or when it spawns two of my good but sadly lower defense units right next to a tough enemy, or in a position where I just can't save them both. But that is a side effect of randomization as your placement tool, and there has been a few times where even the opening battle had an unwinnable situation, but that was only once in several dozen runs. So I think overall, the game is a solid core and it is worth trying out to see if you like it, and with some nice polish it will turn into a reasonably decent palate cleanser of a game that you can play during a lunch break or between other titles. Though I do have one unreasonable wish to make, and that would actually be to let me play as the enemy wizards if I beat their final form, since it would be fun to use their units against the other wizards as sort of an extremely late game challenge. But that is a pipe dream on my part. And if you want to see these videos without ads, be sure to check out the Patreon link down below. All the reviews, first looks, and guides end up there for free with no ads for both patrons and non-patrons.